the BEREC Stakeholder Workshop on ICT sustainability. Following the recent publication of BEREC's report on the impact of ICT on the environment, BEREC is organizing this online stakeholder workshop with the aim to feed the ongoing public consultation on the report by exchanging views on this very important topic. For BEREC, it is clear that electronic communication networks play an essential role in the enablement of a green and digital transformation of Europe. Digitization promises to bring major efficiency gains that translate into significant reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, the digital sector's environmental footprint is increasing notably in terms of energy consumption. Recognizing the importance of environmental issues and the need for this twin transition, BEREC's Strategy 21-25 spells out that it will assess ways to contribute constructively to environmental sustainability. BEREC has been very active under this mandate. As already mentioned, its draft report on ICT's impact on the environment was very recently published for public consultation, while an external study has also been commissioned by BEREC on telecommunications effects on the environment. Demand for electronic communication services and data will only grow, and therefore the challenge will be to find new practices that can help the digital economy grow and at the same time reduce resources consumption and greenhouse gases emissions. To this end, in the current and the next year, BEREC will continue to work towards a sustainable strategy for the digital sector by identifying relevant indicators that could help evaluate the environmental sustainability of electronic communications. BEREC is aware that there is still knowledge to be gained in this area, and therefore collaboration with relevant stakeholders is instrumental, both to learn from your experiences in various areas related to green transition and to feed our findings on environmental sustainability with your specialized knowledge on the digital sector. In this respect, we welcome you all to actively participate in this workshop, and we look forward to your insights and contributions. 2 Q&A sessions will be dedicated to exchange with the audience. Please write in the chat if you have a question or wish to take the floor. Kateřina and Sandrine, our Sustainability Working Group co-chairs, are in charge of this very interesting exercise, and they are available to help you should you have any queries during this process. As you have seen from our agenda, we have invited distinguished speakers to give us their very useful insights. First of all, I would like to invite Ilias Iakovidis, who works as an advisor at DG Connect and is coordinating European Commission's work related to the green digital transformation. Ilias will introduce us to the ICT-related goals in the European Green Deal and the initiatives on digital transformation sustainability. Ilias, we are very glad that you have accepted our invitation to participate in our workshop, and the floor is yours.
Ευχαριστώ, Kostas. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity again. I will try to put up a slide that you tell me if it works. If not, I can do it without. Is that okay?
Yes, it works.
I will need to put it in a slideshow mode. Would you prefer this or this? It's okay like this?
Now it's
worse.
Now it's not the full screen
Anymore.
You know, there's this frame on the side where it says next slide and no notes, but I don't know about the others.
Sorry,
I think if you go back,
I can go back to.
Now it's perfect. Now it's perfect.
Now it's perfect. Okay.
Keep it like this. Yeah.
No, I
Excellent.
don't see the slides anymore. That's funny. I'll have to. Yeah, hopefully they'll come back to me. Are we back to? Do you see the slides or not at all?
No, you stop sharing.
I'm sorry about that. Let's do it again. Okay.
it's coming. Yeah, now it's perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So the first one you've seen already. I have a couple messages, and one is the following. Congrats for the study that you published. And if you combine that with the study that was also published by the Commission, by RDG, you have a lot of information already. And you have a lot of information already how to measure the footprint of both data centers, in our case, and telecom services, which is of your concern. The tables and tables of a lot of metrics will give you headaches. So in a way, it is not easy to find precisely the footprint. And you will need a lot of expertise and a lot of resources to really go down to nitty-gritty of trying to estimate the footprint. While you do that, you will put all your resources of trying to find out what is the negative input. My message here is save some energy on and some resources on measuring also the positive. I mean, all your effort should not go only what I call the conflict of green and digital transition. The green and digital transitions are happening. People do not understand them. I mean, even within the Commission, within the governments, there is no understanding what is this green digital transition. Most of the time people think, well, I take one element from a green transition, one element of digital, I put them in the same document and I create green digital. Doesn't work like that. So what we need really is to have a better understanding how they interact, and conflict, of course, is the one that you're looking at. You see in red, the conflicts are there. They are still, after all these years of measuring, there's a big variation between what the conflict of ICT is. And the e-waste is coming up, and of course the resource efficiency is coming up, and I'll come back to it because we just adopted last week a new regulation around those topics. But I would like to suggest that you focus as well on the enablements and how to measure those enablements as well. We already had a discussion with RCEP and some of the other member states on how to measure it with the, discussing how we're doing it in the Green Digital Coalition. But this is a missed opportunity if you just focus on the conflict. So that's the first message, okay? What we need, of course, is methodologies as well. We are working on those. We will work on use cases. But I think BEREC should follow what we do as a coalition and also look at what you can be doing, giving the opportunity to the telecom operators to do the maximum good in other sectors. The Irish example I got from our last discussion was very revealing on giving spectrum to smart energy networks. But the same things and many other things can be done in different sectors as well, from transport and connected mobility to observation to, it doesn't need to be only emissions, it can be smart cities and clean air. There are many possibilities that you can enable as well with your actions. Next is the new kid on the block, and that is the last week's regulation. So we have a package of 4 things. One is the so-called Sustainable Product Initiative. Now it's called the Eco Design for Sustainable Products. There was also a strategy for textiles. So the fast fashion is kind of out of fashion if we can. There is a proposal for construction that I don't know if it's not really of your concern, direct concern, but there is one on enabling, supporting citizens and consumers in the green transition, where there is a new impetus, kind of a new push to give consumers at the point of sale information about the durability of the equipment, and in particular electronics, and support for the repair. Okay, so that is happening while there will be a specific right to repair initiative at the Q3, so after summer. Now, in this eco design for sustainable products, there is a eco design that, as you know it, and large scope. So it has 3 pillars, this regulation. It has eco design where the energy is now matched with the resource, the material efficiency. There is the digital product passport, which is very much something that we will follow, and telecoms should enable it but as well will be subject to it as equipment. And then there is the prohibition to destroy the unsold goods. This framework is this framework directive will be given delegated acts, the secondary legislation, that we will take one product category at a time. Now we are in the electronics at the moment with the old directive, the old framework. So until we come back to it, so we can look at the circularity as well aspects and material efficiency, it may not be the first one that we consider, but it will come. Now, how soon depends on the resources and the budget and resource of Commission, how soon they will be treating product categories, but we hope to have at least 3 per year. Now, when does the electronics and the equipment, telecom equipment come in? I don't know. We of course have what you know, the targets and the principles. And as you've seen, the 6th principle is about both greening the ICT, which is most of the work that you're doing now, and as well deploying ICT to green the other sectors, what I was trying to push before. And the digital targets, as you know it, there is something called sustainable infrastructures. Now, until we decide what that means, will take some time. So what does a sustainable infrastructure means? But for sure, it will mean something about the line of telecoms. Now, as the data centers do have a metric, KPI, what green data center means, it would be good to jointly arrive with industry to something like a green telecom infrastructure, so you can also be considered by the EU taxonomy. And as you know, that's a headache for many of the companies that are trying to see how to make it with the telecom infrastructures to the taxonomy per se. The other things are old, and we already talked about it in our previous meeting, so I'm not going to mention it here. Now, on what we do across the Commission, there was last week a big kind of launch of the Destination Earth. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but that was a very successful launch with a lot of member states, with the satellite services. So it's all about Galileo, of course, but also about AI, connectivity on the ground, so that we get data about health status of the Earth, creating what we call digital twin of the Earth for many applications. And telecom will have a big and important role to play, of course, there. We have the digital product passport I just mentioned in the regulation directive. And we have a lot of, the smart buildings. So there's a revision of the construction directives and the regulations. And on smart mobility, we're discussing with JRC, of course, GMove and SecGen, some kind of a foresight report, how digitalization, including telecoms, can help the green transition. So that is coming up, so we will have some more details on that. There is a separate discussion between JRC, DG Agri, and us on precision farming, and the role, of course, the connectivity there. So that is about the contribution. On the sustainability, this is the old slide, and you basically already have progressed a lot with your study and your understanding. The question is, what's next for you in terms of just understanding how to measure footprint is one thing. What exactly you will take as a first step on collecting data or even incentivizing the telecoms to be greener, it's another step that we're waiting to hear. I remind you of something that your government and your ministries have committed to again, and that is that they will use green public procurement as a default option. And that means also whenever that is applicable to equipment, okay? And you should kind of look at it, what you can incentivize as green public procurement in the area of telecoms, and data centers are often part of telecoms as well. And then the ministers have also committed that they will do, wherever possible, apply digital and telecom services to green other sectors. So this is something as a commitment, and a full list of commitments is available at the website. Now, again, I think we already talked about it, and we already had a dedicated meeting between the coalition and ARCEP. There is progress. We have collected a lot of data use cases to make a progress on what exactly is the methodology to measure the enablement. So, and the net environmental impact. That means enablement minus the direct footprint. This will be happening in this year. So as you will be kind of working your way up to see what exactly is the role of the NRAs, we will be trying to also work on the methodology of the enablement. So please bear with us. And as BEREC, you can actually be a supporting partner or some kind of you can have a relationship with the coalition to closely follow what is happening there, okay? So thank you very much. This is it, but I can answer question because I'm trying to, well, I don't know if I already spent my time, but I try to be short so we have a Q&A as well. Thanks.
I think you're muted, Kostas.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Many thanks, Ilias, for the very interesting presentation. European Commission has already taken significant steps towards ensuring the green digital transformation. We understand that there are more things to come, and we remain available to support you and your team. I would now like to give the floor to our next distinguished speaker, the member of the European Parliament, David Cormand. Unfortunately, due to changes in his agenda, he will not be connected with us today, but he prepared a video for its keynote. MP Cormand has a very active role in the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee as a rapporteur of the resolution which aims at a more sustainable single market for business and consumers. MEP Cormand will present us the state of play in the European Parliament. The video will be launched now.
I will share it now with you. Please tell me if you cannot see it or hear it.
Je suis ravi que le BEREC ait produit cet excellent rapport qui fait un état des lieux sur le numérique durable en Europe et qui interroge de nombreux acteurs et résume leur engagement respectif. Où en sommes-nous au Parlement sur les questions de numérique durable? En fait, pas très loin. Le fait que transition numérique et transition écologique doivent aller main dans la main est le leitmotiv de la Commission. Et c'est une formule qui donne malheureusement l'impression que la transition écologique et la transition numérique seraient d'égale importance. Or, c'est malheureusement pas le cas. La transition écologique, c'est une nécessité, c'est un objectif politique en soi pour notre environnement, les vies humaines, alors que la transition numérique, c'est une option, c'est un outil, c'est un moyen dans nos politiques publiques. C'est pas un objectif en soi. Pour être certain que nous allons dans la bonne direction, il faut d'abord être capable d'évaluer précisément l'impact environnemental du numérique. Pour le moment, la Commission n'a réalisé aucune étude d'impact réelle, sérieuse, sur l'impact environnemental du numérique en Europe. Et il n'est pas question de mettre en place, pour l'instant, un indicateur de l'impact environnemental uniforme pour l'Europe. Cela nous permettrait pourtant de comparer la performance environnementale des produits et services entre eux et de choisir ceux qui sont les meilleurs. Au Parlement, nous avons déjà posé des jalons ambitieux dans le cadre d'un rapport d'initiative pour lequel j'ai eu la chance d'être rapporteur. Il s'appelait « Vers un marché unique plus durable pour les entreprises et les consommateurs ». Ce rapport a posé un certain nombre d'exigences pour un numérique durable. D'abord, des exigences d'éco-conception fortes pour la durabilité des produits sur tout leur cycle de vie. La mise en place d'un affichage obligatoire sur la performance environnementale avec un index du numérique durable. Il permettait aussi, il demandait de garantir des mises à jour qui ne réduisent pas la durée de vie d'un produit en créant de l'obsolescence prématurée et de permettre le partage de données environnementales entre entreprises et autorités publiques pour évaluer les impacts. Enfin, il y avait la question d'investir dans le domaine des technologies, mais durables. Chez les Verts, on a essayé d'aller plus loin en commanditant une étude sur l'impact environnemental des technologies en Europe. Elle est sortie en décembre 2021. Cette étude, elle est basée sur une analyse du cycle de vie et elle nous a permis de dégager de nombreuses informations pour permettre la transition vers un numérique durable. D'abord, on s'est rendu compte que le numérique contribue déjà de façon importante à l'ensemble des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. C'est 4% des émissions mondiales, plus que l'aviation civile. Pratiquement 10% de l'électricité européenne est consacrée aux technologies numériques, qui utilisent d'ailleurs 40% du budget carbone qui nous reste pour rester sous la barre des 1,5 degrés de réchauffement. Et son empreinte environnementale devrait augmenter encore davantage, de manière exponentielle, d'ici 5 à 10 ans. Donc il est urgent de légiférer. En pratique, dans les textes que nous recevons de la Commission, on observe une décorrélation forte entre les considérations numériques et les considérations environnementales. Dans le programme, la voie à suivre pour la décennie numérique, qui pose des objectifs numériques à atteindre d'ici 2030 au prix de grands investissements, nous nous retrouvons avec des propositions sans aucune mention de l'environnement, mais qui en plus sont déconnectées de la réalité des Européens. Par exemple, un objectif est que 75% de toutes les entreprises en Europe, d'ici à 2030, soient équipées d'intelligence artificielle, de big data ou de cloud computing. Les petites et moyennes entreprises, qui représentent 90% des entreprises européennes, ont sans doute besoin de politiques plus adaptées que celles qui voudraient faire à tout prix du numérique pour du numérique, sans regard, en plus, pour les impacts environnementaux. Dans le règlement intelligence artificielle, l'acte sur les données, le DSA ou le DMA, aucune disposition pour calculer l'impact environnemental du numérique, ni le réduire. Et nous attendons toujours des textes dont nous espérons qu'ils seront ambitieux en matière de numérique durable. Design Requirements for Electronics, exigences de conception pour l'électronique, ou la proposition pour un droit à la réparation. Toutefois, nous avons des doutes à ce sujet. Dans le paquet économie circulaire sorti là, ce mercredi 30 mars, nous avions l'espoir que l'ambition qui était portée par le rapport vers un marché unique plus durable voté par le Parlement soit répercuté. Force est de constater que ce n'est pas le cas. La Commission a renoncé à mettre en place, par exemple, un affichage obligatoire clair, uniforme, compréhensible de la durabilité des produits pour les consommateurs. Sans ça, impossible de correctement comparer les produits entre eux. Ils n'ont pas mis non plus l'interdiction ferme des pratiques d'obsolescence prématurée. Dans la proposition de la Commission, il est même possible pour un producteur d'introduire une fonction dans le produit qui en réduit la durée de vie et des mises à jour qui réduisent les performances d'un appareil, du moment qu'il en informe le consommateur. Nous allons donc travailler à relever le niveau d'ambition des textes sortis et nous attendons les propositions à venir sur le droit à la réparation et les exigences de conception des produits électroniques de pied ferme. Nous nous réjouissons que le BEREC s'engage sur ce sujet. Le rôle de chaque autorité de régulation nationale sera clé pour parvenir à la réalisation d'un Green Deal.
Many thanks for the very interesting video presentation regarding the activities of the European Parliament on ICT sustainability. It appears that the European Parliament has already focused on ensuring that the single market contributes to sustainability, not only for businesses, but also for consumers. And we understand that further work on sustainability is anticipated in the frame of the recent legislative proposals to be discussed. I would like now to give the floor to Sandrine and Kateřina, who will continue with a presentation of the draft berec report and will then initiate a first short Q&A discussion on the report. Following this, both co-chairs will coordinate a one-hour roundtable which gathers representatives of 3 organizations committed in the twin green and digital transition. Thank you very much from my side for participating today. I wish you will continue enjoying the workshop, and we look forward to receiving your input on our draft report.
Thank you very much, Kostas, for this introduction, and also many thanks to Ilias Iakovidis and MEP David Cormand for their introductory remarks. So I will now provide with my colleague Kateřina a short overview of BEREC's latest activities on ICT sustainability. We can directly go to the next slide.
Do you see it full screen?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. So we would like to recall you the context of BEREC's first interest on environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. Thank you. So BEREC's work on ICT sustainability started formally in 2020. In the light of the Paris Agreement and more generally of EU and international environmental targets, BEREC's strategy for 2021-2025 identifies sustainability as a high-level priority for NRAs. Hence, BEREC recognizes the massive positive role of digitalization achieving environmental goals, including climate neutrality. However, the critical importance of digital solutions to decarbonize other sectors of the economy does not prevent the sector itself to do its own environmental transition. As a result, BEREC has been committed working on ICT-related goals of the EU Green Deal and also the UN Agenda 30. This work includes bettering NRA's knowledge on ICT's adverse impact on the environment, but also to identify relevant ways to reduce and mitigate those impacts. To fulfill these objectives, BEREC set up a sustainability working group that has been mandated to work on 3 different aspects. First, developing BEREC's knowledge on the digital sector impact on the environment. Second, identifying existing initiatives from stakeholders such as public bodies, but also civil society and consumer associations, and of course industrial players, in order to note what remains to be done addressing ICT sustainability. And finally, to provide a toolbox for future actions relevant for BEREC and NRAs to contribute to limiting ICT's environmental footprint. We can go to the next slide, please. We can change the slide, Grisha, please.
I did change it.
Perfect. So the working group has been mainly working on 2 documents this past few months. They have been published on March 15th. So first, an external study, as it was mentioned, that provides an extensive literature review on this new topic, but also a map of actions reported by the telecom sector to minimize its impact, and some analysis on levers available for NRAs to act on sustainability. This study was realized by the consortium WIC and Rumble, and it was presented during the last edition of BEREC Stakeholder Forum by Elsa Goldlovich. And secondly, our working group was also working on BEREC's first report on ICT sustainability, namely assessing its contribution to limiting the impact of the digital sector on the environment. So the initial version of the report is currently under a public consultation, as it was mentioned, until mid-April. The document compiles results of activities led by BEREC on sustainability, including the above-mentioned external study. And the main goal of the document was actually to provide an outline of possible new activities for BEREC to act on sustainability. So this presentation will now focus on this document. So we can go to the next slide, please. So I will now present some of the key results. Next slide, please. So firstly, I would like to recall some important figures. So according to the range of studies that we reviewed to edit this report, the ICT sector represents between 2 to 4% of global GHG emissions. Devices account for the largest part of this ICT carbon footprint, between 60 to 80%, followed by data centers representing around 15 up to 20% of the share, and followed by networks that represent between 12 to 24% of this carbon footprint. So the range of figures is explained by two main factors. First, there is no harmonized methodologies yet to evaluate the different scope of emissions related to ICTs. Secondly, data availability and accuracy are quite a challenge due to the lack of standardized data collection on these aspects. So there is a consensus on the fact that the carbon footprint of ICTs is growing, but the exact trajectory is yet subject to debate due to the difficulty to predict energy efficiency gains, but also the effect of new digital uses and services on digital infrastructures. But one of the most common figure is provided by the report Belki and Elmi that estimates that the ICT carbon footprint could represent 14% of global GHG emissions in 2040 if left unchecked. But other studies are evaluating this potential share up to 25% according to our external study. Besides, to conclude this slide, BEREC also notes that greenhouse gases emissions are the most used framework to analyze ICT environmental impact, but actually it is not the only relevant indicator to consider while evaluating the digital sector environmental footprint. Indeed, energy fossil sources consumption and depletion of metal and mineral resources also constitute environmental challenges associated with digitalization. These different indicators call for a multi-criteria assessment of ICT's environmental footprint in future time. So we can go to the next slide, please. Besides, through sustainability is still a new subject for BEREC, some first actions were already taken by NRAs to try to mitigate adverse effects of the digital sector on the environment and to contribute to the twin needed digital and green transition. So indeed, the share of experience is very valued in BEREC actions regarding sustainability. And in our draft report, you will find 3 extensive case studies on ARCEP, Trafficom, and Comreg, which have pioneered a dedicated agenda to promote ICT sustainability. More generally, as most of you know, the majority of NRAs do not have a direct legal power to act on ICT sustainability. But we noted that there are some possibilities to act anyhow in the traditional remit of telecom regulators, including regarding infrastructure sharing requirement under the Electronic Communication Code or civil work coordination under the BB Cost Directive. Besides, there are also other first initiatives led by national authorities that are further mentioned in our draft report. One important message is that since the setup of the working group, more and more NRAs have been developing some first activities and investigation on sustainability. So interest is growing, which is a good signal. So we can go to the next slide, please. BEREC also published first contributions before this draft report on ICT sustainability, and some of the most interesting results are presenting in the draft report we are presenting today. So firstly, a summary report was drafted on the series of workshops organized by BEREC in October 2020 with external experts. For instance, one of the important conclusions of these workshops was the massive energy efficiency gains of digital infrastructures that did allow to limit the increase of their carbon footprint despite the increase of digital uses. However, physical intrinsic limits of energy efficiency gains, the growing demand for data and potential rebound effects seems to be potential factors that can influence the evolution of this carbon footprint in the long run. Secondly, BEREC also published two important opinions regarding the BB cost directive recast and also the state aids guidelines recast proposal for broadband, that both tackled the topic of sustainability. Very generally, BEREC supported the greater place given to environmental sustainability in both of these projects. And BEREC also insisted on the need to develop common methodologies and indicators to support eventual future consideration on sustainability issues. So I will now give the floor to my colleague, Kateřina.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. Good afternoon also on my behalf. In order to learn more about the initiatives, I would like to bring you to this new slide. Thanks a lot for changing. We met various other entities from a simple reason to avoid possible duplication of work. We held a number of bilateral meetings with very wide range of parties. We talked to EU bodies, partner or international organizations from the sector, from within the civil society and consumers organizations, and of course also with industry associations. In general, the consensus was reached on the positive effects of digitalization on other sectors' decarbonization, but also on how significant the environmental footprint of digital technologies, especially of devices, and of the manufacturing phase is. From among the possible levers where BEREC could contribute, the stakeholders we talked to mentioned data collection, incentives for the sector, and consumer awareness mechanisms. Next slide, Krisha. Thanks a lot. As you already heard, BEREC also commissioned an external report from WIC and Rumble, which was presented at the BEREC Stakeholder Forum 2 weeks ago. So I will not go into detail on its findings, but the BEREC report also covers only the most important results. A large part of the report tackles the digital sector's footprint that was already covered by Sandrine. And we can add at the moment on the addition of study, no comprehensive quantitative studies quantifying ECN's impact in each life cycle phase, deployment, operation, decommissioning. In terms of the greenhouse gases, some operators estimate that the operation phase concentrates even 90% of network's carbon footprint. Another big topic covered by the researchers were the actions developed by operators to minimize their impact during the different phases of the life cycle of the networks. And you can see some example in the diagram on this slide. Among others, some appeared as more widely applied in practice, such as reuse of infrastructures, mast sharing, micro-trenching, these in the deployment phase, energy sufficiency measures in the operation phase, and also waste management in the decommissioning phase. The study also identified potential levers which are available for national regulatory authorities, bearing in mind the current EU regulatory framework and the different contexts at the national level. BEREC took note of some of these analyses while reflected on its own roadmap on environmental sustainability. We can go to the next slide. And I would like to present to you now the main conclusions which are stemming from the BEREC report. Excellent, thank you. BEREC has already planned initial works on data and indicators to be able to take part in the process of identification and definition of indicators to assess the environmental impact of electronic communications networks. This work stream will begin in the second half of this year. BEREC also understood that there are already some existing regulatory tools for environmental targets that could be applied in certain situations. Some NRAs are already explored exploring the applicability of the Article 44 of the code and also spectrum management rules. But expectations are made also about the currently revised baby cost reduction directive and the state aid schemes. NRAs could also refer to encouragement to migrate to more energy efficient next generation technologies. Other actions could be made in order to assess the common criteria of what it is the good practice for limiting the environmental footprint of electronic communications, and to use data-driven approach to promote end users' empowerment, and to raise awareness on the impact of devices, services, and certain uses and most sustainable practices. And more potential activities are outlined in the report. And all these actions should be done, of course, in good collaboration with other relevant parties. We can go further. Thank you. The BEREC report assessing the contribution of the networks to limiting the impact of the digital sector on the environment was open for public consultation, as you well know. We will be collecting contributions from all stakeholders until 14th of April, and we would like to ask you to submit your contributions by means of the EU survey tool. You can see on the screen the QR code that will give you access to the public consultation. Later during the spring, we will analyze the inputs from received contributions and present the updated report for approval to the BEREC decision bodies in May and further in June. And the final publication is then expected for second half of June. Thank you very much for your attention so far. And now we would like to open a short Q&A session to hear your remarks and questions on the report. If you have any question, please write it down in the chat. You can also ask to take the floor if you have a quick contribution to make on BEREC's draft report on sustainability. If we will have the time, we will give the floor to one or two participants. So now the discussion is opened. Don't hesitate to use the chat tool, or you can raise your hands and speak up. Excellent. We have a question from Lucas Chiamoni. If we expect the ICT sector share of GHG emissions to increase rather than decrease, the ICT is supposed to enable reductions in other sectors of activity. Sandrine, would you like to respond?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Jean-Luca, for this interesting question. And actually, you are tackling a great subject of interest, which is the calculation of ICT net impact on the environment. But just a disclaimer, for now, our work in a BEREC Sustainability Working Group was focused on direct effects of ICTs on the environment. So what we can call the environmental footprint of the digital sector. That means that we only did consider the digital sector's direct impact, so adverse impact on the environment. So we excluded from our perimeter ICT's indirect effects on the environment, including positive ones. So as you are writing, ICTs are expected to contribute to decarbonizing of other sectors, but that was not the core subject of our first report because it will require a transsectoral expertise, and we will indicate you to the European Green Digital Coalition that was presented just before by Ilias Iakovidis that does tackle this question of the net impact of the digital sector.
We have another question from Rudolf from Statistics. How does BEREC assess the decreasing energy use of EU telecom networks despite a growth in data use? This is contrary to many academic studies that use the faulty kilowatt hours to gigabytes metric to extrapolate that by 2030 telecom networks would use all of the EU's energy. So this is rather a similar reply. Currently, we are in an exploring phase on the on the impacts on energy use, because we are well aware of the increase of data use and then the following impact on the networks. But we are certainly planning to work also on this topic. We would like to enter into debate also with energy providers, and this year our debate on indicators should also address this in a way. I don't know, Sandrine, if you would like to add something.
Just to clarify a point, in a BEREC draft report, we mostly based our analysis of energy use of digital infrastructures on the International Energy Agency numbers. So for now, yes, we are really referring to existing academic framework, but as you said, Kateřina, questioning, challenging existing methodologies and indicators will be the point of our next item that will start in June this year.
Thank you for the addition. Don't hesitate to ask. Now you have the chance. Not only questions, also comments. Excellent. We have another question from Doug. A comment related to assessments of ICT footprints. There exists full scientific LCA studies of ICT, including all the aspects that we requested. Still, the main challenge is, as he would say, how to scope the assessment and where to define boundaries and what to leave out. Yes.
Just on that, thank you for this contribution. And of course, if you have any studies you think deserve to be quoted in the BEREC's draft report, we will be happy to receive further information on that. But just to precise our analysis on that, regarding LCS studies, the external study noted that there was a lack regarding the specific scope of networks, so telecommunications, not ICT in general, because there is a lot of different studies, and actually regarding global ICTs, we noted that the main challenge was about harmonization and common methodologies assessment. And regarding LCS studies on ICT, it is true that at the moment of the edition of the external study, we did not note any existing LCA and multi-criteria study. That means not only focused on greenhouse gases emissions, but also on other indicators relevant for quantifying the effect of digitalization on the environment. But again, if you have studies to share, we will be very happy to include them.
We have a question from Peter from Cullen. How does BEREC see its role? How will it interact with the Commission on existing and future EU sustainability initiatives, such as the Eco-Design Directive prohibiting designed obsolescence, data center guidance, etc.? Oh, thank you, Doug, for a link for the study. To respond to Peter, very good question. We are planning very close cooperation on the Eco-Design Directive. Currently, we are waiting for opening the public consultation, and we plan to take part in it because it is considered as very important issue, the eco-design as such. And the designed obsolescence is also another question which we would like to tackle also with the reference to end user empowerment and strengthening their position, especially with regard to the use of devices and the applications on their devices to prolong the life cycle of the devices they are using. So from our point of view, this is very important, and we really plan to engage strongly on these topics. We have another question from Nicole from Ofcom. The report noted that BEREC will consider supporting communication campaigns addressed to end users by collaborating with consumer associations, civil society organizations, and consumer and environmental protection agencies. Could we say more about this? If it would be linked to the eco-labeling efforts across the EU. So I don't know, Sandrine, if you want to respond now this from the other points of view.
Yes, maybe to explain this sentence in chapter 6 of this draft report. It is based on several different sources. First of all, in the BEREC strategy for 2021-2025, BEREC already identified end users' empowerment as a relevant tool to consider to act on environmental sustainability. And besides, it was a recurring, we can say, a recommendation to work on this aspect that was expressed by the stakeholders we've met, but also internally by NRA's members of BEREC. So for now, we are currently having discussions on future work on sustainability for the preparation of BEREC draft work program for 2023. So for now, I cannot detail too much this aspect, but we will be sure to provide further information when it will be fixed. And of course, it will always be in good understanding with the European Commission initiatives on this topic, which is a key partner of our activities on sustainability.
So we have 3 more minutes designated for the Q&A session of the first part. So we can accept a few more questions. And if there are not any more, thank you, Ilias, for the link. So I will give a couple of seconds to possibly finish your question if you are typing.
Yeah.
Yes, from Rudolf. Some telecom firms have said that data use and streaming and the environmental impact means that IP interconnection should be charged. Will you look into that? This is a difficult question. Sandrine?
Yeah, no, for now, it's not, we do not discuss these aspects in BEREC draft report, but it's true that we noticed this demand from stakeholders. So we will investigate how we can address that. But for now, it is not part of our scope.
As far as I know, the discussion is taking place in the open internet working group, but we possibly cannot share any more information in detail, as we are not yet part of the debates as working group. So hopefully during the year we might see some development. And we have a question from Bogdan. Given that 60 to 80% of greenhouse gas emissions in the ICT sector come from devices, how can we manage the business model of manufacturers that promotes 1 to 2 new device models per year? Yeah, this question is closely linked to question of Nicole and also of Peter Dunn, because all these consequences are strongly related to eco-design of the devices. So as it was already said, we would like also to pay attention to this. Although NRAs are not in charge of regulation of end devices, it is still a huge portion of the emissions of the digital sector. So we would definitely like to follow on the debate and possibly engage into the discussion as well. And
also in the draft report, we highlight the importance of a data-driven approach, meaning providing better information available to end users and consumers in general, to be sure to elevate the level of knowledge and also create some positive incentives in the sector, especially regarding devices, as you noted.
Yes, Ilias is writing that new eco-design criteria for mobiles and tablets are coming out soon. We know, and we are very much looking forward to it. So thank you. And now we came to the point when we should go to our stakeholders roundtable. We got another link from Alex from Reens. So thank you very much. You can see it in the chat if you want to follow it. And now I would like to hand over back to Sandrine.
Thank you very much, Kateřina. So we will close now this first part of the workshop that was dedicated to some introductory remarks and presentation of our activities on sustainability. And now we will have, we are delighted to have a roundtable that gather players from civil society, public authority, and the ICT industry working on the twin digital and green transition. Namely, we are very honored to welcome for this discussion Lise Breteau, contributor at Green IT, a leading organization on sustainable ICTs, Kaoru Inu, director of JZ, the Global Enabling Digital Sustainability Initiative, Alessandro Gropelli, Deputy Director General of ETNO, the European Telecommunications Network Operators Association, and Astrid Jacobson, Head of the Sustainability Group Transition of the European Environmental Agency. So to start, I would like to ask to the speakers to present a bit more your respective organizations and your approach of our common topic of interest. So more precisely, in your view, what are the key environmental challenges raised by the digital sector? And also, could you provide a brief description of your organization's activities and initiatives to respond to those? So we can start maybe by Kaoru Inu, director at JZ, if possible.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for inviting Jessie. We're really pleased to be here. Just a really quick intro to Jessie. We're an industry association. We focus on the connection between sustainability and the digital sector, especially looking at telecoms activities as well. What we really focus on is this, the marriage between people, society, and profit, and working to focus on the enabling agenda of technology. So really glad to be here. Going straight into your question, there really are two main topics that Jessie has been looking at. The first is addressing Scope 3 emissions. As a reminder, Scope 3 is looking at indirect emissions that businesses are accountable for through their suppliers, distributors, and also the use of their products by customers. It is a huge topic because these are the toughest to directly control. So it's an issue that all organizations should be concerned about. For a business, the emission sources can be anything from your manufacturing processes to business travel for your employees, as well as the full life cycle of products. So unsurprisingly, Scope 3 makes up a majority of a company's footprint. So if one needed a clear understanding of how interlinked and interwoven sectors are in tackling the climate crisis, doing a deep dive of one's Scope 3 emissions is the perfect illustration of that. And within Jessie, the challenge that we've been seeing, well, not just for our members, but also for the digital sector, is how to accurately measure and capture these indirect impacts to have a clear action plan. Within our working groups, we are exploring these challenges. So we have the Climate Change Committee and a subcommittee called the Carbon Accounting for Data Centers sub-working group. So we are asking our members about their business models, assurance processes, existing reporting mechanisms, supply chain analyses, if any. So these are just some of the questions that we are exploring and will shape what we hope will be a more standardized approach that we can take to relevant stakeholders to whom we can work with so that we can take that conversation further. The other topic that I'd like to touch on is data-driven solutions for monitoring, assessing, and preserving our biosphere. The second point is really going back to Ilias's remarks in the introduction. So action towards resource efficiency, minimization of waste and emissions. This is a business as usual practice for a lot of companies and organizations now. And while it's very important, what should come hand in hand with that is the carbon handprint, so the enabling component. This involves zooming into how developing products, services, or technologies which reduce their environmental impacts can be measured. So in this case, footprint would be the negative impact, and then handprint is used to refer to the positive impacts. And having a sector-wide approach that brings more knowledge into the net positive environmental impacts of technology is key. For Jessie, we're very proud to be part of the European Green Digital Coalition, or EGDC. This is a consortium that we are leading alongside ETNO, Digital Europe, European Digital SME Alliance, and GSMA. And then we're also working with experts from Carbon Trust, Deloitte, and Sustainable ICT, so that we can help companies develop methods and tools to measure the net green impact of green digital technologies. Now, this work focuses around knowledge building and coordination and function as secretariat, but really our goal here is to support the digital sector in its development and deployment of green digital technologies, as well as, of course, science-based recommendations on digital transformation. And finally, just another point that Jessie's been working on is the Digital with Purpose movement. This is an industry-driven movement of leaders. Our goal is to join forces in a race to the top to deliver against the Paris Agreement and the sustainable goals with a target of 2030. For this initiative that Jessie is leading, what we call DWP members, they open themselves up to our robust framework of metrics, and it monitors performance in both delivering digital solutions to societal and environmental challenges, as well as minimizing the negative impacts that arise from the deployment of digital technologies and services. So this process is stringent, so much so that if there is inaction from DWP members, there is at risk of putting this company of being removed from the movement. But we really believe that our benchmarking processes has helped build this ambitious criteria for digital companies that are forward-looking and really eager to make a contribution.
Thank you very much for this presentation. We can see the diversity of activities led by Jessie, tackling some of the most important challenges while assessing ICT's impact on the environment and mitigate adverse impact of these technologies. I particularly noted your work regarding Scope 3 emissions of digitalization, which is a very recurring challenge mentioned by stakeholders made by BEREC. So thank you very much. So now I will give the floor to Lise Breteau, maybe to give some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Sandrine. Hello, everybody. So I'm Lise Breteau. I'm an attorney, and I'm a contributor to the collective Green IT. which is a French community gathering IT experts, developers, designers, etc., all professionals who have a high sensibility to the environmental impact of the digital sector. So we've been working on this topic since about 20 years, which because the Green IT was founded about 20 years ago. So we consider ourselves as being experts of this topic. And we have been publishing numerous reports on the environmental impact of digital, in particular in France, on the world level, on the European level, and at the level of a business, of a company. All these reports are quite recent, and you can find them on our website, greenit.fr. And there is an English version, at least of some of them, at least the executive summary, I think. So all these reports try to make a complete assessment of the environmental impact of digital, and not focusing only on GHG emissions, because the environmental impact is not just about carbon, and the debates are too easily focused on GHG emissions. And I want to make this really big warning on that, because when we focus too much on carbon footprint, we forget the other impacts. Whereas the other impacts are quite substantial. Just to give you one figure, which I think is really important, we have published, well, we have worked on a report which was ordered by the Greens, and which in the chat, for which the chat gave a link on the greensefa.eu website. You have a link to this report, and we worked on it. And what one of the two key indicators which were identified in this report are particularly at stake. And let me give you one. The resource use, minerals and metals, are equivalent, which are used each year in the digital sector, are equivalent to the weight of all human living today. So we all human livings, actually, well, currently living on Earth today, we weight the weight of the earth and minerals and metals which were used and excavated and transferred, etc., just for the needs of the digital sector, which is, of course, massive, and which will be growing and growing and fast growing. So we think that this material impact is absolutely key, and it must absolutely be taken into account. And we cannot just limit the debate on the carbon footprint. It is very important to make what we call multi-criteria life cycle assessments. And on these life cycle assessments, taking into account many criteria, or at least multiple criteria, we already have methods which are reliable, which are well known, and also which are recommended by the European Commission. And these are known as the PEFs, the Product Environmental Footprint methods. I will give you the link in the chat when I'm finished. And these are scientific methods which were developed by the JRC, the Joint Research Center, which is the scientific body within the European Commission. So these methods should be used, and they are used. They were used, for example, by the French ARCEP and ADEME, the French national authorities for the very first official report in France about the environmental footprint of digital in France. This report was published early 2022, and this was based on a multi-criteria life cycle assessment. So these are methods which can be used, which can be taken into account by NRAs and also by private organizations. These methods are totally reliable, and it's very important not to limit to carbon. First key message, and second key message, but which was already said previously, so I won't develop. The carbon impact, the climate change impact, is the current impact we found in the European report. We found that our use in Europe of digital is already equivalent to 40% of a sustainable carbon budget per capita. So each inhabitant of the European Union already uses 40% of their individual carbon budget, sustainable carbon budget, just with our use of ICT. So it's huge, and it's growing fast. So there is a big challenge about limiting this impact, and we have, of course, proposals to limit this impact. Some of them were already mentioned: repairing, eco-design, etc. But there's a lot of work to do on this side, because it's not included yet in the business models of industries and of companies, commercial companies. Many things are to be changed to guide market practice towards more sustainable practices. But I will stop here because I didn't check the time, and I would not be surprised if I've been talking too long.
No, it's perfect. Thank you very much, Liz. To recall Green IT historic commitment on this topic. Actually, it was one of the organizations that did contribute to highlight the issue of ICT sustainability in the public debate, and also, as you said, a huge contributor to advance science-based knowledge and assessment of ICT's environmental footprint. So thank you. I will now give the floor to Alessandro Gropelli from ETNO, if possible.
Thanks a lot, Sandrine, and also thank you to Kateřina, also for your leadership, because you have started an important work in the regulators community. As you mentioned, I'm from ETNO, the European Telecom Association, and we represent the big operators in Europe. Very interesting discussion so far. I think from our perspective, I'll try to look at it from a supply side and from a demand side, which are both very relevant and important angles for us. If I look at it from the supply side, which is where we are as telecom operators, it's about which kind of networks do we put out there. This was mentioned quite a lot during the first part of this meeting. The transition and the speed of the transition from the legacy networks to the new or next generation networks is the key here. I think that it was in the Digital with Purpose study from JZ and Deloitte a couple of years ago that they tried to quantify a bit the impact of the type of networks we use. And the takeaway beyond the precise numbers is that if you do a full transition to FTTH and a full transition to 5G, and you are then able to switch off the old networks, that's when you are going to really make a leap in terms of energy efficiency of the networks behind the internet, basically, and our communications. So this leads me basically to say that all the digital policies and the digital regulation that is happening with the European Commission, DG Connect, and with the BEREC and the national authorities is also a green policy. So all your policies that you're putting forward to accelerate the transition to 5G and fiber is automatically basically a green policy, because you're helping the transition to a situation in which we can switch off at a certain point in due time the old networks and can start working on the basis of energy efficient ones. This is not an easy task, as you know, because in Europe, the pace of investment is still slower than in some other constituencies, but it's picking up. So the main question is, how do we ensure that telecom regulation helps us to transition faster to the new types of networks? And there is not only telecoms regulation, there are also other rules that are relevant. I mentioned one example. We are in discussions right now on the switch off of 2G networks. So right now we are all working on 6G. We are working on investing and rolling out 5G to the population, to all the population. But we still have legacy networks that, because of services used by some vertical industries, sometimes you might hold back how fast you go in switching them off. So this is to explain the importance of the transition to the new network generations. Last point on the supply side is how aware are our clients and how aware are the vertical industries of the fact that a fiber network or a 5G network is more energy efficient, because we have from the telecoms viewpoint scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, but if you take it from the viewpoint of our clients, everybody is a scope 3 to somebody else, right? So it would be also important that we work together with the institutions and with the national regulators to create more awareness of why it is important, maybe for a manufacturer to pick up certain types of connectivity rather than others. Now, this brings me to the enabling potential, so to the demand side. It's not only about how fast we go in the rollout of networks, it's also how much uptake there is out there. And uptake in Europe, depending on the market, can be sluggish for the most advanced types of networks. I'm talking fiber and I'm talking 5G. And so how do we use policies and demand side policies to go towards a faster uptake of this new generation of networks? And that, in our view, is a positive, because if you need to do that, you need also to think how you transform your business model so that it becomes more digital. And if you digitize or think how to digitize your processes, you're going towards a situation in which ideally you use less, you generate less carbon emissions. So I would also invite us to look at the demand side policies as policies that take away from traditional ways of producing or interacting in society and move us to ways that are more energy efficient and therefore less polluting. Last thing that I want to mention is what are the incentives that are driving our sectors today. I think that there is one big incentive related to energy, which will become even stronger going forward, also in the context of the very outrageous geopolitical situation that we are living, which is that energy, from a viewpoint of investors, shareholders, and analysts, energy is operating expenditure. and you want the operating expenditure to go down. So there is a pressure, a significant pressure from financial markets to become more efficient as a sector and use ultimately less energy and move also towards more renewable sources of energy. We track it in our State of Digital Communications report. The percentage of energy that we use from renewable sources is going up very fast over the years. And in the case of some members, it's very close to the full package, let's say. Last thing, it is about what are we doing as an organization. I think JESI is the first thing that we are doing, meaning that we are fully engaged in the Digital with Purpose movement and also in the work of JESI that actually develops concrete tools for its companies and its members, including telecom operators, to reduce their carbon footprint. The European Green Digital Coalition, as was mentioned, is another thing we are doing. Right now, we are working on the case studies that allow us to understand how in practice do you generate that enablement potential and how do you measure it. And then very technically, if you wish, we have a sustainable development working group. We activated a Green Deal task force to look at all the Green Deal related files in telecoms. And finally, also a work stream on sustainable finance. So we are following closely the developments on the taxonomy. The telecom sector was one of the first sectors to issue green bonds in the past. Again, it goes to financial incentives, and that's a way to make things happen in real life out there. So that's why we are following sustainable finance. Finally, to Lisa's point, I think she mentioned it's not only about carbon emissions directly, circularity is very important, and circularity at all levels. We are not talking only about devices, but there is an increasing interest and activity among members in circularity related to the networks themselves. So as you dismantle networks, how do you recycle, how do you reuse, and so on. So that's pretty much it from my side at this stage. Unfortunately, I will need to leave at 3 p.m., so I might not be able to engage beyond that time. Thanks.
Thank you, Alessandro. You insisted on the existing tools in the regulators' traditional mandates that could be relevant in terms of environmental sustainability, and also highlight the energy efficiency gains and efforts from the sector and, of course, ethno activities on the topic. So thank you very much for that. I will now give the floor to Astrid Jacobson, if possible.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Astrid Jacobson. I'm from the European Environment Agency, which is a EU body providing knowledge for decision-making on improving Europe's environment and moving towards sustainability. So my perspective, and I'm head of group of the Sustainability Transition Program. And so my perspective is perhaps more on the knowledge and asking the right questions. So on the first question on what are the key environmental challenges, I have 6 points I like to raise. And I very much agree with the point of view that all aspects of green should be addressed, not only decarbonization, but also e-waste and chemicals and environmental challenges throughout the whole consumption and production system. And that's the second point, looking at production and consumption system rather than in the environmental footprint of devices or a more limited dimension because of digital technologies have the ability to dematerialize and substitute. So in order to have a more true picture of the effect of or the environmental impact, I think we need to look at the production and consumption patterns in a life cycle perspective. And that leads me to the third point, to look at the net effect, because of the substitution at play within systems and digitally enabled new business model. It's important to look at this larger perspective, also because production and consumption patterns are changing rapidly, post-COVID trends, and we live in a very changing world with the changing outlooks, and to have a dynamic, forward-looking and long-term perspective, we should focus on the net effect and at the coming up of new business model. In the EA, we look at sustainability transitions as a system change. We look at what is needed in key systems of transformation towards sustainability, and that both implies scaling up and accelerating sustainability solutions, but also phasing out current unsustainable behaviors and patterns. And this is where the digital business model and transformative powers of system change can play a role. So we could consider not only looking at the environmental challenges of the ICT sector, but also the broader issue of sustainability. And that would imply looking at aspects such as just transition, inclusion, addressing the digital divide, addressing other risk factors involved in digital enabled new business models. Then finally, I think people outside the telecom sector don't understand really what are the opportunities for increasing efficiency and lowering the environmental footprints from the IT sector. What are the differences between best practice and worst practice? Because that would inform some of the measures and policy decisions on what type of ICT practice should be promoted. So better understanding of the prospects and trends in terms of increasing the environmental efficiency of the ICT sector would be another aspect to when defining the environmental challenges of the sector. And then finally, I mean, maybe the question is rather to not only to look at the environmental challenges, but to look at the sustainability challenges and opportunities of the role of digital technologies in transforming key systems. I mean, this is a very nascent policy agenda, and as has been mentioned, there's a little understanding and little knowledge and consensus on methodologies. So it's important that we get the questions right in our in trying to understand the role of ICT in sustainability transitions. And I think the larger perspective of sustainability transitions, business models, systemic change is important to include in the further work on creating this knowledge base. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Astrid. It was really interesting to have your view as an environmental expert and not only as a sectorial expert regarding your analysis on the important to consider also other dimensions of sustainability. Indeed, we identified this as a potential resource questions in collaboration with other working groups within BEREC, but otherwise it was very interesting. Thank you very much. So we can now start the second part of this roundtable that will focus on how to design solutions that can meet the challenges we identified and discussed just now. So I will ask you, the speakers, in your perspective, what could be the role of telecom regulators to contribute to limiting ICT's environmental impact on the environment and more largely contributing to ICT sustainability? And how can we foster collaboration between different stakeholders? So, of course, users, citizens, but also industrial players, public bodies, and experts on the topic to contribute to limiting this adverse impact on the environment. So to begin and answer this question, I will give the floor to Lise Breteau from Green IT.
Thank you, Sandrine. So about the role of national regulatory authorities, first thing, I would say that an important role in our eyes would be to guide the market on the relevant tools, methodologies to evaluate impacts and to eco-design, etc., etc. I think it's the first role of the regulatory authorities, and it's not specific to the digital sector. We find it in many different areas, the role to be the one who leads the market to the right tools. And in ESG standards in general, we see that there is also a strong demand for more harmonization, standardization, etc., etc. And there is regularly the call to the regulatory authorities to show the right way, where to go, which methods should be used in order to be objective, in order to have the right tool. So I think it would be one of the key roles of BEREC, ARCEP, etc., to guide the market, the organizations, to the right tools. And I will say again that there are already tools in our sector to measure the impact and the enablement of ICT. The methods already exist. There is this PEF, this product and organization environmental footprints developed by the European Commission. And also the life cycle assessments should be based on the ISO rules. Very simply, very basically, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, tools already exist, and the regulator has a very important role to highlight the right tools, and it should also allow everybody to avoid greenwashing, because using an irrelevant tool could lead us to greenwashing. And that would be too bad. So many efforts for ending in results which lead us to greenwash. It would really be a pity. So I would say that it's the first role. And second role, something that has not been debated so far, I think, would be to monitor the market. To act as a trusted third party. in our sector, in the digital sector, we often hear that we don't have data, we can't find data, we lack the right data to be able to measure the impact. We don't know what is the impact of this equipment, of that technology, of this use of that technology, etc., etc. We lack data. And when we try to find data, to go get data from companies, organizations, etc., sometimes there is a problem of confidentiality, of intellectual property, of business secrets, etc., etc. So the data is not open. And in that respect, a national regulatory authority could play the role of a trusted third party to collect the data so that it remains confidential from the market, and to analyze the data and to allow analysis afterwards. And I think that's a very important role to play by the NRAs. And also, but more classically, I would say, the NRIs are, of course, here to monitor the market, follow up on the implementation of the regulations, and adapt regulations when there is a need to adapt. But this role of follow-up is very important as well, because in the environment, let's say, world, we often see practices where objectives are set up, but are not followed up. And that's also a problem. And there's been well, I'm not going to talk about it too long, but there's been a litigation in France, and I know that it's not the only country where there's been litigation on that. A claim was raised against the government for not following up on the objectives that the government had set up itself for following the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So there's been a litigation, and the state has been condemned because of this absence of follow-up and monitoring. So I think it's very important to have this eye to keep on what's happening in real life, and not letting the objectives just written on paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, for these recommendations and ideas for future work relevant in your perspective for telecom regulators. I noted notably your recommendation on bettering available methodologies and providing common framework in this aspect, and contribute to further data accuracy as a third party body. So thank you. I will now give the floor to Astrid Jacobsen to take over this question.
Thank you. And again, I'll try to rather ask the questions, or rephrase the questions we are dealing with. So I think for the regulators, telecom regulators' role in fostering the environmental sustainability of the ICT sector, you could say that there's many roles for this transition, creating a level playing field, mitigate risk, remove barriers, enable system transition, and create the necessary digital capabilities for users, and necessary for this transformation. So we want to think about how policymakers can enable the transition of the Green Deal, and perhaps there's clarity on the end goal and the objective of the twin transition, but there's little consensus or on how to do it. What are the policy choices and what is the path forward for this transition that we call it a nascent policy agenda. So it's really about the house in terms of aligning the different policies necessary for this transition. And perhaps you could call it a strategic policy alignment. How can green inform the digital transition? How can digital shape the green transition? What are the policies and measures? So it's really about creating policies for perhaps a strategic green operating model for this digital transition. And I think one important aspect is the alignment, because it's not about what are the policies and measures, but also how they are aligned at the same time. Infrastructure, regulation, user perspective, digital capabilities, mitigating risk, and so forth. So it's a complex pattern of alignment between regulation and structures and infrastructure and so forth that has to be in place around an operating model that can enable these new business models. And that, of course, challenges the traditional way of governance, and new forms of collaboration and partnership would be necessary. Also, co-creating with users, engaging with the wider society in data ecosystems, and so forth. So I think we're also thinking about new types of regulatory paradigms where this can happen, because there's a lot of complexity and because the challenges about scaling up. We all know of very successful pilot projects, and we talk about opportunities, but how to scale up and accelerate this new type of digital enabled business model and production and consumption patterns. You need scale and you need speed, and therefore it's important to secure this alignment around the digital and green elements of an operating model within the policy objective. So this is perhaps more looking at the addressing the challenges, but co-creation, innovation, engagement, new types of governance, collaboration will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Astrid, for your strong message calling for better alignment and coordination between different initiatives and policy regarding the twin and green transitions, and also your reflection regarding the needed change of governance that is needed by the environmental challenges and opportunities that are arriving. So thank you very much. And I will now let the floor to Kaora Inu to continue on this topic.
Yes, thank you. Really quick on this one, governments and industry really must work together to accelerate and shape enabling environments. So policies that foster infrastructure investment, business plans, and funding models so that it is an inclusive digital transformation. So this point of securing an enabling environment is key so that companies are really able to thrive and contribute in a way that they do best, innovate and deploy. Long-term wise, greater promotion of sharing infrastructures to reduce financial and environmental costs, improving sector-wide competitiveness and sharing of active equipment. So for example, spare fiber optic capacity should be on the table. Regulators can definitely play a big role in facilitating these conversations between energy and telecom sectors. We're still a little bit disconnected, although we've been engaging with energy actors through different working groups and through events such as these, but certainly regulators have a role to play in being that bridge. Of course, there is also the question of competition laws to consider, but we do make it a point that that it is all, again, the role of regulatory actors and relevant stakeholders to explore pro-competitive sharing. And just a really quick point that I think is important is we need to identify the specific existing technologies that are already helping companies and organizations accelerate current efforts towards sustainability. So going back to our Digital with Purpose report, we identified 7 specific technologies that will be the most impactful: digital access, fast internet, cloud technology, Internet of Things, cognitive technology, so AI and machine learning, digital reality, and blockchain. So in our report, we do go into the technical details and use cases of how some of them are just companies, but more importantly, private companies and public sector actors are already focusing on these solutions to address their environmental impact. Again, ultimately, we are here to work towards collective progress, and private-public partnerships are essential to deliver on these common values that we have already referred to in the past as Digital with Purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this contribution. I will now leave Kateřina moderate the roundtable.
Thank you very much. We received numerous questions. To start with, we received many links, many thanks for that. But the first question was from Peter Dunn in reaction to Liz. His comment is that Liz was advocating the so-called digital sobriety, or instead that we need to be more efficient in the digital sector, that is to carry on using ICT but develop more efficient systems. So please, Liz, if you want to respond to this.
Well, if efficiency is energy efficiency, I think it won't be sufficient. I don't have the question under my eyes, so I'm not sure. But what we say is that we must focus on the material part of digital, and it's usually our biggest message, because many people don't have the knowledge of the impact of digital. So many people think that it's the data use which is the key point of impact, and people don't realize that it's not the data use which is at stake first, but the first priority should be on the equipment. If we don't buy a new equipment, we lower our impact. It's not if we don't use our equipment that we will really lower our impact. The biggest impact is on the material used for the manufacturing of new equipment. In that sense, it's true that our message includes a dimension of lowering the number of equipment in circulation. If we go ahead of this reasoning, of course, there is a need not to over-equip our industries, our homes, our field, because digitalization is a totally incredible thing. It's transformative of our minds, of our habits, of our societies, etc., etc. But we are coming to a point where we are going to be in lack of materials. It's not just a question of environment. It's also a question of planetary boundaries. We are going to be, it is going to be more and more difficult to excavate resources, minerals, metals, rare earths, etc., etc. Why? Because it's going to be more and more costly, because we are progressively using all the easy, all the low-hanging fruits, and the interesting resources are more and more costly to go get in the earth. So we are facing, and even now, we have seen in the recent weeks and months that there was already a conflict of resources between the automobile industry, the ICT industry, etc., for the manufacturing of semiconductors. We are already in crisis of resources, and that's a problem. So our message is to say, are we going to make choices in our societies about which use we want to prioritize of ICT? And we think it's a question which should be asked now, while we still have a choice to select what we want to prioritize, medical equipment or equipment to watch soccer games in the subway when you come back from work. I mean, well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't watch soccer in the metro. I mean, I don't, but never mind. That's not the debate. But the thing is, and I think it's a real dilemma, because how can we choose? On what base should we choose? But we think that at some point we are going to have to choose. And if we don't choose it on a clear basis, we think that the choice will be very easy. The rich ones will have access to the resource, and the poor ones will not have access to the resource. This could be an option. So do we want this option, or do we want another option? So the question is open.
Thank you very much, Liz, for your response. Then we have a question from Alex from the Greens on the material footprint of 5G deployments, which might be much higher than the expected energy savings. And she's talking about the proposed way forward for telecom to explore the different generations of networks, how they could complement with each other. And her question is aimed to know if they explored such complementary path so far in the 5G deployment strategies of their member companies. And she already got response from Sarah, who is pointing out for voluntary network sharing agreements to reduce the cost to provide more efficient network deployment. So in Ethnos views, there is also the EU Green Deal and sustainability expressed in an article, which we have in the link which Sarah provided. Then, because we are slightly running out of time, which is really a pity because the debate is really interesting, we have a comment from Jens from Ericsson on the reliability of data on LCAs. He's pointing out to different statistics and different data, and comparing ICT's emissions. He's also pointing out to the carbon footprint from imported devices, which are manufactured abroad, not only in the EU. And
Hi, sorry, Kateřina, maybe I can just
please,
talk.
yes, go on.
Yeah, I saw some figures that I reacted to, like the figure of ICT versus aviation, and According to our studies that I think is based on the most extensive data possible, we see that the ICT sector, traditional IT, telecom, is around 1.3% of the global carbon footprint. And it has remained flat like that for many years now, and started to go down because ICT invests a lot in renewables. But then aviation, at least before COVID-19, was at least 4% if you include the high altitude effects and so on. And then you must add a little bit of life cycle assessment there, but I have not done that. And since we are talking about mainly in Europe today, I would like to remind you all that most data, I would say all large data centers are running on renewables already in Europe today, like Facebook, Google, and so on. So all their data centers run on renewables. Also Equinix and Digital Reality, they run most of the colo data centers. And also most of the telecom networks, telecom operators run on renewables, their networks today. But I agree that as the point today we raised many times, that yes, it's the devices production that's important for us here in Europe. But there we also see that sales go down because we use our devices longer, and I think it's a good transition that we use our smaller devices like laptops and smartphones and tablets more and not the old desktop PCs and TVs, which is good, of course, much lower energy consumption. I think that was my main point. Also, of course, it's very important that we rely on the best data available and not make simple models based on assumptions that can be very, very wrong. Sorry for my long remark here.
Thank you very much, Jens. We have lots of other questions. I'm afraid that we won't be able to cover all of them. We have here a question also from Ilias to Astrid, but they will be on the same panel tomorrow, so maybe they will be able to discuss this question also later on. We have a remark from Rudolf, also on 5G antennas and the share of them covering the connectivity deployment. And later on, we have a question from Luc on fiber transition. At the time, the copper to fiber transition is more actual than ever. So why are the incumbent the only ones that were invited? No representative from the access seekers takers. To respond to this, this is really an organizational issue. There is no intention to exclude any parties. We invited only few organizations, and we questioned more than 25. So it was really a matter of time availability at the very moment. Then we have a question from Sharu, from DG Energy to Liz. On a perspective where electricity in France is largely carbon-free and the users have limited negative impact, while this would not be the case anywhere else in Europe, yes, this really goes to the national cases. So if you want to address it, Lisa, but please very shortly, we are really running out of time.
When I was talking about the use, of course, the use is an issue. Use is an issue, but not really in terms of electricity. Why? First, electricity is not an environmental indicator. It's a vector, and we have to look at which energy was used to produce electricity, which is in your question, which is mentioned in your question. So in my view, the question of which energy is used for the production of electricity is not specific to ICT. What is specific, but it's true that depending on the type of energy used for the production of electricity, you will have a difference of impact in terms of carbon emissions. Totally agree with that. The problem in ICT, in terms of use of data, is not so the carbon cost, I would say, but the fact that if the new uses are massive, then the infrastructures will have to be increased. And again, we go back to the impact of the material, of the material resource. And again, the digital impact will be in the material. So I stop here. I don't know if I've been clear enough, but I stop here because I said I would be short.
Thank you very much, Lise. We have some more links and more comments in the chat, which you can read. Unfortunately, we have no more time for other questions. So for now, many thanks to all of you participating actively, only in listening mode. Everything is appreciated. We are very much looking forward to your submissions to the public consultation, or possibly more comments, which of course you can always reach us by email, so you can contact us anyway. The panel tomorrow, it is a panel of EEA, where actually Ilias and myself will also take words and discuss a bit. So you can go to EEA website. So sorry for doing a little bit of advertising, but it will be a certainly very interesting event as well. So again, thank you very much for your participation. All the best for the rest of the day, and hopefully see you again on some of our workshops or other possibilities where we can discuss more on digital sustainability. Thank you very much once again, and goodbye, everybody.